It's a good day for rain. Another funeral service as we say goodbye to another game that will join X-Defiant, Concord, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and the great beyond of games that shut down within a handful of months. Multiversus. It was announced that Season 5 will be the last update to the game. You'll still be able to play the new characters that are earnable through the Battle Pass, which is Lola Bunny and Aquaman, but the game will be going offline, though you will still be able to play it offline, which is more than you can say for things like Concord. I hate how everything gets compared to that game now, but it really is the gold standard for flop, failure, and fuck up. And it's a damn shame Multiversus walks this same path. Multiversus actually pulls a pseudo Morbius here, where it happened twice. So I really liked this game in beta. I streamed it a lot, and I had a great time. I was one of the top ranked Shaggies in the world, not to toot my own horn here, but I just had so much fun with it during the beta, and then they took the beta down, saying that, it was only a limited time access to it. That was when people stopped playing it as much, so it really felt more like they didn't maintain the numbers they were hoping for, so they decided to take it off and then bring it back later, hoping that more people would be really hyped for the second go-around. Unfortunately, the second go-around was much worse, with people not flocking to it like they did initially, and the complete product was missing features the beta had. The biggest and, in my opinion, most unforgivable sin was they slowed the pacing of the game down to a glacial crawl. The beta had a great speed. It was nice, it was fast, nuts to butts action, it felt good, and then when they brought it back in the full release, they turned it down to like 0.5 Weenie Hut Jr. mode, and it was much less enjoyable. It was so much slower. And most people, myself included, hated that change. It felt much worse than it did when it was a beta. So, even though a lot of people didn't come back to the game, those that did from the beta didn't stick around with it. I stopped playing after like a week and a half, whereas I played the beta for like 2 months, pretty strongly. It was just genuinely a good time. A platform fighter that felt pretty fresh. You get to play as LeBron James dunking on bitches. You get to play as Shaggy going Super Saiyan and doing some really fun shenanigans. It was great. And then when they took it offline and brought it back, it was a shell of its former self. It's like they sent it to fucking shock therapy or it got lobotomized or something. It just wasn't the same game. And a lot of people felt that. So it didn't have strong player numbers, so this isn't the most surprising news that they're shutting it down. It's just disappointing. It really is just a shame, because I feel like if they never took the beta down and instead they just added things people were really wanting, like bringing ranked, like competitive matches to the game in a timely fashion. That was a can they kept perpetually kicking down the road, it felt like. But instead they just took the game down and made people that liked it wait even longer for it to come back, and then what they got was a fucking zombie of the game that they used to like. To me, it just boils down to delusion, thinking that somehow taking the game down would create some kind of, like, feverish hype around it with people scratching their neck, waiting for it to come back, so they'd start spreading the word, telling their friends, and when they drop it again, to be like fucking Half-Life 3 releasing, everyone would flood to the game this time around. When that was never going to happen, all this did was confuse everybody. It was just a baffling choice, and I think it killed the game's momentum. Even though, like, even during its beta, it was starting to lose some momentum, it still did have a pretty loyal player base that you could have absolutely built upon and grew into something beautiful. And it's a lesson that the entire gaming community has been learning over the last year, that these games, these multiplayer games that come out, there's a good chance they don't stick around. So a lot of people don't bother buying anything like skins or passes, because why the fuck would you waste money on a game that's not going to be here in a month? There are so many games that shut down so quickly that it feels like a scam if you spent money on it. Multiversus is one of those. They have a $100 Founders Pack that the players are not going to be getting a refund on when this game shuts down. That is, in my eyes, a fucking load of baloney. That is some horseradish for sure. It's such a fascinating cycle of Ouroboros in its own ass here, because the reason games like Multiversus and X-Defiant and all that are shutting down is because they don't have players that are spending enough money in the game to make it sustainable. Like it doesn't make financial sense to keep operating I'm actually having a fucking Porky Pig moment right here. It doesn't make sense to keep paying the developers for Multiversus and to keep building Multiversus if the players aren't spending enough money in the game. But players aren't spending enough money in these games because the uncertainty of the game's lifespan is always called into question. Why would you start spending money in a game that might not be here in 5 months? And that's being generous. A lot of these games don't even make it 5 months anymore, which I think is absolutely absurd, but case in point right here, Multiversus took a year-long hiatus. It went into the hyperbolic time chamber to beef up, get bigger, and then it came back and was much smaller, much weaker, and super wimpy. This game came back and died faster than a fucking butterfly on the interstate crashing into a windshield. It's just so silly to me. So yeah, overall, I'm not surprised that Multiversus is shutting down. I feel like most people probably aren't stunned by that news. You don't need the Mayan calendar to predict this one. But it still is sad. Like, I enjoyed the game. I thought it was great in beta, and then they shut it down, and then brought it back, and then shut it down again. They pulled it twice. Like, come the fuck on. It's just ridiculous at this point. At the very least, though, you will still be able to play this game offline. If anyone ever wants to have LAN parties for Multiversus, that will at least be an option, so that's good. But personally, I really do think there was a chance to turn this into a very niche community. It was never going to reach the heights of like a Super Smash Brothers or something, and it probably wouldn't reach like a Brawlhalla either. But you could have still carved out your own community for Multiversus. It still did have a community. Maybe just tap into that and build there, and maybe don't kill the game's momentum in the first place by taking it offline and putting like a fucking year-long hiatus on the next iteration of it that happens to be a worse iteration of what once was. To me, it just feels like they took too many steps in the wrong direction here, and then there wasn't a whole lot they could do to salvage it, and so they've pulled the plug instead of even trying to somehow make something out of it, which is kind of par for the course for a lot of games these days. So yeah, that's really about it. See ya.